Ενώ οι επιστήμονες αναζητούν αποδείξεις για τη θεωρία τους, οι ενδείξεις για τον κυριολεκτικό παράδεισο συνεχίζουν να σειραίουν. Ο δόκτωρας Μέλβιν Μόρς προχωρά τη μελέτη σε εκείνους με τη λιγότερη πολιτισμική φαντασία, στα παιδιά. Η πρώτη μου συνάντηση με αυτό το φαινόμενο έγινε όταν συνάντησα ένα κοριτσάκι, τη μικρή Κέιτι. Κοιτούσα το άψυχο κορμάκι της και αναρωτιόμουν αν υπάρχει τρόπος να τη σώσω. Η αξονική έδειξε είδημα στον εγκέφαλο, κανένα αντανακλαστικό, και βρισκόταν σε μηχανική υποστήριξη της αναπνοής. Τότε έρχεται η οικογένεια μέσα και μου ζήτησαν αν μπορούσαν να προσευχηθούν για αυτή. Σκέφτηκα ότι δεν καταλάβαιναν πως δεν είχε καμία πιθανότητα να ζήσει. Πιάστηκαν γύρω της και άρχισαν να προσεύχονται. 3 μέρες αργότερα η Κέιτι ανένυψε πλήρως. Λίγο μετά την επίστευτη της ανάρρωση, επέστρεψε για επανέλεγχο. Με θυμήθηκε να της κάνω τεχνητή αναπνοή. Μου φάνηκε παράξενο που το θυμόταν. Η Κέιτι εντυπωσιάζει τον γιατρό, αναγνωρίζοντας όχι μόνο τον ίδιο, αλλά και έναν άλλο συνεργάτη του. Ήξερε ποιος από τους δύο τους είχε μπει στο δωμάτιο πρώτος. Θυμάμαι πολύ καθαρά ότι κατά τη διάρκεια της ανάνυψης τα μάτια της ήταν κλειστά. Μάλιστα βρισκόταν σε βαρύ κόμμα όλη αυτή την ώρα. Σκέφτηκα, για σκέψου, τι γίνεται εδώ πέρα. Τώρα έχει προκαλέσει την περιέργειά του. Ο γιατρός της ζητά να θυμηθεί την πισίνα. Η απάντησή της τον ξανασοκάρει. Η αθώα της απάντηση ήταν «Εννοείς όταν συνάντησα το Χριστούλη και το Θεό?» Εκείνη τη στιγμή δεν είπα τίποτε άλλο. Ίσως έφταιγε το σοκ, το ζωγραφισμένο στο πρόσωπό μου. Ίσως ντρεπόμουν. Αλλά τη ζήτησα να επιστρέψει για νέα επανεξέταση. Τότε μου είπε λεπτομέρειες για το πώς είχε ανέβει στους ουρανούς. Μου είπε ότι ο Χριστός της είχε πει ότι ήταν ώρα να γυρίσει πίσω. Και εκείνη απάντησε «Όχι, θέλω να μείνω στον παράδεισο, περνάω ωραία». Και μετά εκείνος τη ρώτησε «Δεν θέλεις να ξαναδείς τη μαμά σου?» Και τότε επέστρεψε στη συνειδητότητα.
But don't you want to see your mother? And at that point she returned to what we call consciousness.
Είδε πράγματι για λίγο τον παράδεισο η Κέιτι. Κάποιοι θα ισχυριστούν ότι τα παιδιά μπορούν να κατασκευάζουν εφάνταστες ιστορίες. Μήπως η εμπειρία της Κέιτι και άλλων σαν εκείνη μας φέρνουν λίγο πιο κοντά στην αλήθεια, στην αναζήτηση του παράδεισου. Αν βασιστούμε στις μαρτυρίες όσων λένε πως έφτασαν ως εκεί και επέστρεψαν, παράδεισος και κόλαση είναι αληθινά μέρη. Στο μεταξύ, η ιδέα της ζωής μετά θάνατον δοκιμάζεται και το πού βρίσκεται ο παράδεισος αμφισβητείται από τα θεωρήματα της κβαντοφυσικής. Ενώ η πιο ενδελεχής και προωθημένη σύγχρονη μελέτη καταλήγει στο αδιοφιλονίκητο συμπέρασμα. Τώρα μπορούμε να δηλώσουμε με βεβαιότητα πως η ζωή συνεχίζεται. Το ερώτημα παραμένει. Συνεχίζει πού? Μέχρι σήμερα, οι ληστές και σκεπτικιστές απέτυχαν να δώσουν μια πιστευτή εξήγηση για αυτά τα καταγεγραμμένα φαινόμενα. Και καθώς η επιστήμη μαθαίνει περισσότερα για το σύμπαν και τη θέση μας σε αυτό, τα νέα στοιχεία μοιάζουν να προσεγγίζουν λίγο παραπάνω το δυσδιάκριτο στόχο μας. Πρέπει να αγνοήσουμε τα στοιχεία αυτά. Μπορούμε να τα αγνοήσουμε. Ο τρόπος απάντησής μας μπορεί να μας επηρεάσει αιώνια. Αφήγηση Ευτυχία Λιβανίου. Τεχνική επεξεργασία Στούντιο Τρίτων.
The most certain event of our lives is death. It is also one of the most mysterious. Death for Shakespeare was that undiscovered country from which no traveller returns, and only 100 years ago, when medical science was in its infancy, doctors could do little to postpone the inevitable. But as their skills have increased, more and more people can now, almost literally, be brought back from the dead. That fact may turn out to have profound implications for our own attitudes to death and the scientist's view of the human mind. Today, modern techniques of resuscitation mean that some of Shakespeare's travellers do return, and occasionally they tell of strange experiences, some of which appear to defy scientific explanation. In a respectable London suburb near Hampton Court lives a man who has twice been at death's door and survived to tell the tale. Derek Scull, age 66, is married with 2 children.
You seeing your mother today?
Probably will later.
He's a retired army major and now works in a large firm of lawyers.
Well, basically, I pride myself on being a fairly pragmatic, down-to-earth sort of person, but the experience that I underwent in 1978 remained etched in my memory for the last 8 years, and certainly I couldn't believe my eyes or my senses at the particular time. I had a heart attack, and I found myself in hospital in the intensive care unit on the first day. The hospital medical authorities had done everything they could for me. I was lying there in an operation robe, mask on my face, and obviously I'd received an injection of morphine or some sort of drug to keep me under control. I wasn't experiencing pain. In fact, I was feeling at peace with the world. And suddenly, I seemed to take off and float. Airborne, I suppose one would describe the word, into the corner of the room where I was able to look back, and I was conscious of lying there, and there was my own body. I thought, good gracious, what is this? In fact, I was sort of, I can describe it, I was looking at my toes on the ceiling, but sort of looking over, and there was my body immediately below me. I was in the corner, left-hand corner of the room, looking down at this body, and I had a perfectly good eye view of the bed and the entrance to the ward. And then I was also suddenly conscious that outside the room there was my wife standing there in a red trouser suit talking to a nurse. I thought, my God, what an inappropriate time to arrive. I'm up there, there's the body, and what's going to happen? And I thought, something must happen. But the very next thing I was conscious of was sitting beside me was my wife in this bright red trouser suit, and I was there. I'd come down from the ceiling somehow, and there she was. This is why I know it wasn't a figment of my imagination, because it was so clear. I've given you the illustration of exactly what my wife was wearing. That was, and I couldn't have seen her at the time, so this absolutely convinced me. And it was certainly cemented after my second heart attack when I went through a totally similar experience. And I'm absolutely converted to this theory that something, call it your soul, call it whatever you like, does in fact temporarily detach itself from your body, it goes to a vantage point, looks back and reviews the situation. And that's exactly what I felt I did on both occasions.
For the religious, experiences near death such as these may well have deep meaning. But recently, they have begun to intrigue men of science. At St. Thomas's Hospital in central London is a clinical neurophysiologist who is one of Britain's leading experts in brain function in a wide range of mental disorders. His name, Dr. Peter Fenwick. His interest in the so-called near-death experience is not religious, but to do with the science of consciousness. This program is his assessment of some of the latest scientific research.
There has been an enormous amount of scientific interest recently in near-death experiences. Originally, we thought they were rare, but every country in the world that has looked for them has found them. So you see, they occur commonly and really very widely. This particular area for me is quite fascinating because one of the things that I'm interested in is consciousness. What is consciousness? Is it something which is just limited to the skull? Is it within the mind? Is it just the functioning of the brain? Or is it something much wider than that? And can the near-death experience help us with this at all? A classic near-death experience is that of Mrs. Barbara Lambert. Aged 37 and married with 4 children, she lives near High Wycombe. A close neighbour of hers is her twin sister Bobby. Although not so obviously near death as Major Skull, her case is nevertheless typical of the thousands that have been studied.
It happened the night after I had my first baby, and I'd had a very painful, long drawn-out labour, and I'd been very frightened, and at one point I had prayed that I would die because I found the pain so agonising. I was put into a room and I went to sleep, and I had a lot of after pains. There was great discomfort. The next thing I remember, my nose, what I thought was my nose, was 2 inches away from the ceiling. Very textured ceiling, which I didn't recognise. And I realised that I was too close to be viewing it from a bed. And then I turned round and I looked down on the person in the bed. I thought it was my twin sister. And I studied the face and realised that it was my face. We've got slightly different noses. And, you know, that in fact it was me. When I realised that I was out of my body, I was slightly frightened for a short time. But after that, it seemed quite natural. The next thing, I felt that I was in this long, dark tunnel with a very, very bright light at the end, so brilliant. It was more brilliant than the sun, absolutely brilliant. And I felt it was very natural to be drifting towards the end. It seemed very peaceful and quite natural thing to do. You know, I didn't feel that I could go the other way. I felt it was like a magnet being drawn towards the end. But as I got closer and closer, it was as if the light was more of a flickering light, and, you know, I wanted to go there. But I arrived at the end and I realised I had to stop there, that I couldn't just go through. I stopped there. And when I looked through, it was like looking through a window. As I looked, I could in fact see it was like a small country garden. And then I could see a man. He was dressed in like a brown, lightly tweeded suit, no tie, and was stood behind a fence. So he was just a few feet away from me. But he recognised me, so I felt as if I had like a physical appearance. He asked me why I wanted to die. I can remember thinking, is it Grandad? I knew that he had died, so that I must be at the point of death. He'd died when I was 9 years old. And I felt that if I went further from the point where I was, that I would die. And it's as if he was veering me towards decision. He did say, well, who would look after the baby? And when I said, well, I don't know who can look after the baby, that's when I felt that I was back in my body, having made that decision. I'd made a decision to live. It definitely wasn't a dream. It actually physically happened. I couldn't tell you what I dreamt last night, last week, but this was was near 17 years ago on March the 1st. Like, it's as if it happened 5 minutes ago. It's that clear. I've never forgotten it.
Now, that was one of many dramatic near-death experiences. Could they have a simple explanation? An obvious explanation for the near-death experience is that they've been caused by what the doctors have done to the patients. Now, anesthetic gases, we know, can produce mystical experiences. We also know that drugs such as the opiates can produce mystical experiences. Now, there are real problems with the traditional drug explanation. Firstly, you'd expect people to be confused. Near-death experiences, they're not. And secondly, you'd expect the experience itself to be very random. But it isn't. It's quite specific. There have been many different studies now from throughout the world which show that the experiences that people have fall into certain definite groups. Not everybody has all the experiences, but nevertheless they do seem to be forming a pattern. A good example of how remarkably consistent the experiences seem to be is the case of a Merseyside retired nurse who, 18 years ago, was so ill she was almost given up for dead.
I had a minor operation in 1969, and things went wrong during that operation. And I was very, very poorly for about 3 days. And on the Saturday morning, the nurse came, said, "Mrs. Williams, I'd like to take your temperature." After the operation that I'd just had, apparently I was bleeding, but nobody knew this at the time. She took my temperature, went to the next bed, and I leant over to get my tea and collapsed. And with that, I seemed to leave my body. And I went up onto the clock on the wall, but I wasn't conscious of walking or anything. I just sort of floated to the wall, to the clock on the wall in the ward. I felt real. It felt I was really up there. You know, it was my body that was up there. My whole body, my dead body, was down on that bed. It wasn't like a dream at all. It was real life. And by this time, the doctor had been summoned, and the sisters, the 2 night sisters, were there, trying to get my blood pressure. The SCN was trying to get my blood pressure on one side, and the doctor, with an Australian voice, said to try it on the other arm. So when the doctor tried to pummel me on my chest, and nothing happened, the nurse said, "I'm sorry, I just cannot get blood pressure."
There's no blood pressure.
This doctor said, "I'm sorry, sister, she's gone. Pulmonary embolism."
Sorry, sister, I think she's gone.
I just didn't understand what all the panic was about, you see. I couldn't believe that I had died, because I felt fine up there by the clock. I couldn't understand why they were fighting for me. With that, though, they pulled my bed with the oxygen cylinder away from the wall and were taking me out of the ward. But as soon as I saw them taking my body, my dead body on the bed away, I thought, gosh, I'd better go back. I thought, well, I can't let them go without me. And I seemed to come from that position by the clock back into my body with a thud sort of thing, you know. And then I had a lot of pain. Just for seconds, it was a great deal of pain again, but I hadn't had any pain. You know, and I came out of my body. I didn't come to till about 11:30 in the morning. But in that time, from 6:30 till 11:30, I was up in what I presumed to be heaven. It was really a tunnel of light. It was just a vivid brightness, very serene, tranquil. I went up to this beautiful park, vivid colours, and gorgeous music. A chorus of voices singing, and in the background there were sort of trumpets. Beautiful music. I saw several people that I knew who appeared to have just gowns on, and I saw my father in this place. He too seemed to be sort of floating around, no effort, no words spoken, but come, welcome, you know, it's nice to see you again. In that time, my husband apparently was sent for and saw me and was told then that I had gone and told to come back the next day for my death certificate. But then it was just this vivid brightness, and there I saw some pontifical being, I presumed it was the good Lord. This figure was radiant, absolutely radiant, white gown, and he didn't speak, but he welcomed me. He was standing by the side of a throne, and he was letting the little children play around there. And I thought then, what a wonderful person you are, just as I had imagined the good Lord to be. I was not allowed to stay there. But I didn't want to come back. I didn't want to come back from that place. It was beautiful.
Book by an American doctor, Michael Sabon. He's a cardiologist, and he's taped interviews with over 100 people who have had out-of-body experiences, mostly after heart attacks.
Tubes and...
Dr. Sabon started out very skeptical.
I had felt that I could prove that this was not real by showing that what they said they saw from the ceiling happening in the room during the resuscitation really didn't occur at all, but it was something that perhaps they had seen on television and would reconstruct as happening to them at the time they were unconscious. Perhaps they were lying semi-conscious on the bed and could hear what was going on in the room and then later reconstruct that as a visual event.
Now, were you unconscious at this time, or was this prior to the time that you lost consciousness?
No, I was unconscious before I hit the floor. I seemed to be up and above just watching what's going on. Except I was out of my body, so to speak, looking down on it from a height above.
Could you see things in clear detail, or was it blurry?
No, it was quite a bit of detail.
What was one of the first things they did? Do you remember?
Struck me first.
That was the first thing.
The doctor struck me with his fist, raised it above his head, and came down. Quite a blow. They took a plastic funnel-like thing and crammed it down my throat. The man that put it in there got it in, started in wrong, loosened up some of my teeth. And doing it, I got very angry with him, but not the body there on the table. I got angry watching him do it from above. And another doctor with a syringe and appeared to be an extra long needle, took it two-handed and thrust it in what apparently was my heart.
Now, you said that you were watching this from somewhere else in the room. Whereabouts, if you had to say physically, were you in the room if you were watching it from somewhere else?
Actually, I was above the ceiling, or appeared to be. But for all practical purposes, as far as I was concerned at that time, the ceiling was transparent. I was above the ceiling, but I could still see. And then when they got the machine set up, they took a little round disc, sort of round, I think it was round, and placed them on my bare chest and hit me twice. I could watch what I think they call an oscilloscope. A straight line was appearing on it. After they thumped me the second time, then it started fluctuating back and forth.
Specific details of how they'd been resuscitated had been recorded.
When I was able to go back and look at the details of the cardiac arrest itself and compare them to what the patient actually said he saw from the ceiling, there was a high degree of accuracy of what they said they saw to what actually did occur. And I must say that this is something that I totally was not expecting to find.
I could see my face very clearly, and they were lifting my eyelids to see where my eyes were, I guess. They were pushing on my chest and putting an IV in my hand. I could also see them putting a little needle in my other hand, something about blood gases.
Many of these people were able to give me specific and unique events that were happening that were not discussed at the time, that were out of their physical visual field where they were lying, and were unique to that own resuscitation, and not something that was generally seen on routine resuscitations viewed on television or whatever.
They were putting an electric shock to my body, or something like that. I knew my body was jumping every time they put those pads on me. I didn't feel nothing. They gave me a shot in the groin. It appeared to me they were putting a shot in there, my right side. Well, the doctor came and said to me, he says, boy, you had a close thing. He says that I had died and all that stuff. I say, Doc, I says, I didn't die. I says, I seen everything you did. And he says, what do you mean? I said, well, I saw you with the needle trying to get in my right armpit and going around the other side and all that. I said, I saw it all. He says, that's impossible. He says, you were clinically dead. That was absolutely impossible. And he just didn't believe it. He wouldn't believe it. He just walked away. Well, I said to him, I said, is it true, Doc? He said, yeah, it happened. And he just shook his head and he walked away. But I'm telling you, I didn't feel dead. I mean, it was just like I was standing over there and talking to you there.
I've been able to show in many cases that what they said they saw actually did occur. I've looked into the traditional explanations for this, and they don't wash out. They don't explain how these people were able to see these things. So I'm left with the possibility that what they said happened to them actually did occur the way they said it occurred, i.e. they somehow looked at it from a position separate from their physical body.
Nevertheless, from the strictly scientific point of view, it's too soon to draw any certain conclusions.
I'm certainly glad that I had the experience, because at least my husband said that he didn't need any convincing that miracles happen and that there is a good Lord. And if that's all I came back for, to convince my dear husband before he died that there was nothing to worry about, then I'm quite happy.
I feel now that I've experienced a different dimension, that there is somewhere where we all go, and that we all go to this same place. There'll be someone there who knows us to guide us, that it's not frightening and it's not painful, and it's a very natural progression, that you're drawn automatically to this place, and that, you know, it's a very loving, peaceful place to go to, you know, as natural as walking through a garden door or a garden gate.
If death is going to be one of those experiences which is preceded by the experience that I went through, well, then it's not a fearful thing. I mean, everybody is fearful of death because of the unknown. Obviously, one doesn't want to depart from this world feeling in great pain and agony. You can't wait to go out. But in my particular instance, if this is a forerunner of death, this is the way you go out, feeling serene and at peace with the world and your fellow beings, then quite honestly, it won't worry me when my time comes.